Welcome to Reddit's For Sleep, where every story is your escape into calm. If this video helps you relax or drift off tonight, gently tap that like button so we can keep making more just like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and let us tuck you in with a fresh hour of stories every single night. Story 1. My husband's retirement dream turned into a nightmare, and I don't know if I can forgive him. I never thought I'd be here, typing all this out for strangers on the internet, but I don't know what else to do. My hands have been shaking on and off for days, and even the smallest decisions, like whether to make coffee or tea, feel too heavy to carry. When we bought this house, it felt like everything had fallen into place. It wasn't big or fancy, just a modest 2-story with a cedar shingle roof nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The kind of neighborhood where people still wave when they pass you on the street, and where the air in summer is thick with the smell of barbecue and fresh-cut grass. At first, life here felt safe, comfortable. Now, all I can see when I look around is betrayal. It started last fall, over a late dinner. The kids were upstairs, one working on algebra homework, the other scrolling on her phone and giggling over some video. My husband was unusually quiet as he pushed roasted potatoes around his plate, the skin of his thumb raw where he'd been chewing on it, a nervous habit he picked up years ago. Finally, he looked up. "I've been thinking," he said. His voice was soft, like he knew he was about to drop something heavy on me. We could retire early, not fully, just take a break, sell the house, buy an RV, homeschool the kids, travel the country for a year or two. At first, I thought he was joking. I let out a small laugh and shook my head, waiting for the punchline. But there was no punchline. His expression was serious, hopeful. "I mean it," he said. "We've saved enough to make it work. If we don't do it now, when will we? The kids aren't babies anymore. Soon they'll be out of the house. And then what? We'll just sit here, going to work, and paying bills until we're too old to do anything." I swallowed hard. He's always been good with money, painstakingly cautious. The kind of man who updates our budget spreadsheet every Sunday night without fail, who clips coupons, who once spent 3 hours on the phone disputing a $12 charge he didn't recognize. That's part of why I married him. Growing up, money was a constant source of stress in my family. I thought I'd found someone who could give me the stability I never had as a child. But now, the stability I'd come to depend on felt like it was slipping through my fingers. "Maybe we could take a long summer road trip," I suggested gently. "Test the waters before making any big changes." He shook his head. "It's all or nothing. If we don't take this chance now, we'll regret it forever." The kids were split. Our son was over the moon at the idea. Visions of playing video games in new places and sleeping in a bunk above the driver's seat, lighting up his face. Our daughter, on the other hand, was crushed. She's always been fiercely loyal to her friends, a homebody at heart. When she realized she wouldn't see her best friend for 2 years, she sobbed into her pillow that night. The fights started soon after. At first, we kept our voices low, arguing late at night when the house was quiet. But as the weeks went on, the tension grew heavier, until even the kids noticed. "You're killing my dream," he said one night, his voice cracking with frustration. Those words lodged themselves deep in my chest. I thought we'd reached a fragile truce. For months, he didn't bring it up again. We went about our lives as if nothing had happened, celebrated Thanksgiving with my parents, decorated the tree for Christmas, watched the kids tear open presents on a snowy morning in December. I let myself believe he'd let the idea go. But last week I came home from work early and found him in the kitchen. "Yeah, I think we could list in the spring," he said into his laptop. My stomach sank. I stepped quietly into the room. "Who are you talking to?" He spun around, startled. The color drained from his face. "A realtor," he admitted after a pause. "We need to move fast if we're going to do this right." "You were going to sell the house without even telling me?" He didn't even flinch. "You're never going to agree," he said flatly. I had to move forward. Something inside me broke. This man, my husband, the person I built a life with, was willing to uproot everything without even having the decency to talk to me first. I don't remember what I said after that. My voice shook. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. The rest of that day passed in a blur. He tried to explain, said this was our one shot at a life worth living. He insisted I was too afraid to take a risk, too stuck in my ways to see the bigger picture. But all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart in my ears. Now the house feels hollow. The living room, where we curled up to watch movies. The dining table where we shared pancakes on Sunday mornings. Even our bedroom feels foreign. I lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got here. Part of me still loves him. That love hasn't vanished. But another part, the part that craved stability, trust, partnership, feels so deeply hurt. I don't know if that love is enough anymore. I keep replaying the moment I found him on that call. His calm, matter-of-fact tone as he talked about selling our home, as if I didn't even exist. How could I trust him again? How do you forgive someone who didn't think you deserved a say in the life you built together? Story 2. My boss refused to approve my vacation, so I followed the rules exactly, and watched his plan unravel. I've been working at the same mid-size insurance company for almost a decade now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills. And for the most part, I've gotten along with everyone. Well, everyone except my new boss. When I first started, the department was run by a woman named Teresa who understood balance. She worked hard, but she also believed people needed time to recharge. She'd encourage us to take our vacation days, and if someone needed to leave early for a kid's soccer game or a doctor's appointment, she'd wave them out the door. Then Teresa retired last summer, and everything changed. Her replacement, Dave, came from some high-pressure sales background. From the moment he walked in, he seemed determined to prove how efficient he was. "You don't get ahead by being soft," he said at his first team meeting. He started small at first. Longer meetings, daily progress reports, little passive-aggressive emails about people leaving right at 5 o'clock. But over time, it escalated. People stopped talking and laughing in the break room. Sick days got side-eyed. A few coworkers even started skipping lunch to avoid his comments about commitment. I kept my head down. I've got 2 teenagers, a mortgage, and a dog who thinks she's human. Quitting wasn't an option. Then came the vacation request. Every year, I take the first 2 weeks of August off. It's a family tradition. 2 weeks in a little cabin up north on Lake Superior. No TV, no internet, just fishing, reading, and card games by the fire. The kids look forward to it all year. In March, I submitted my request, like I always do. Plenty of notice. A week later, Dave called me into his office. "We're entering a critical period in August," he said, his eyes scanning some spreadsheet on his screen. "I can't approve your vacation." I stared at him. With respect, I've taken these 2 weeks every year for almost a decade. The company's never had an issue before. "That was under Teresa," he said sharply. "Things are different now. We need all hands on deck." "Dave, I have non-refundable reservations." "That's not my problem." I left his office shaking with anger. That evening, my husband tried to calm me down, but I could barely eat. The thought of telling the kids we couldn't go, it made my stomach twist. That's when I remembered something Teresa told me years ago. The company legally has to let you take your accrued vacation days, she said over coffee one morning. They can deny when you take them, but they can't stop you from using them altogether. I dug through the company policy that night. Sure enough, employees who hit their PTO cap stop accruing additional time. It's designed to encourage people to take their vacation. I checked my balance. 195 hours. The cap was 200. If I didn't use some soon, I'd stop earning more. An idea started forming. The next morning, I walked into Dave's office with a smile that probably looked faker than a plastic plant. Hi, Dave. Since my August vacation can't be approved, I wanted to let you know I'll be taking off every Friday for the next few months until my PTO balance is manageable again. He frowned. What? No, we're too busy for that. I kept my tone calm and even. I'm afraid it's not optional. I'm about to hit my PTO cap, and company policy says I can't accrue more until I use some. If you won't approve consecutive days, I'll take them one at a time. Dave sputtered for a moment, clearly not expecting me to know the rules better than he did. Fine, he said finally. But don't think this will reflect well on you during performance reviews. I didn't reply. And so began my summer of 3-day weekends. Every Friday, I slept in, took my dog to the park, baked bread with my daughter, and read on the porch while the sun warmed my bare feet. I'd log in Monday morning to find frantic emails from Dave, but I didn't care. The rest of the team noticed too. A few coworkers quietly asked how I pulled it off. When I explained the PTO cap rule, their eyes lit up. Within weeks, 3 others started taking their time off too. By mid-July, morale in the department had shifted. People were less afraid. A few even started leaving right at 5 o'clock again. As for August, the second week rolled around, and I set an out-of-office message for my approved Fridays. Then I got a surprise email. Your August vacation has been approved. No apology, no explanation, just approval. I smiled, closed my laptop, and packed for the cabin. On the drive north, I watched the trees blur past and felt lighter than I had in months. Sometimes following the rules to the letter is the best kind of revenge. Story 3. My mother-in-law tried to claim my wedding dress, so I made sure she'd never touch it again. I never imagined I'd be the type of person posting on Reddit, but after the week I've had, I need to get this off my chest before I scream into a pillow. I got married 6 months ago in a small, intimate ceremony. Nothing extravagant, just close family, a few friends, and a quiet reception at the same little winery where my husband and I had our first date. The dress was perfect. Not flashy or overdone, but simple, elegant, and timeless. A long lace train, delicate beading along the neckline, and soft ivory satin that caught the sunlight just enough to make me feel like I was glowing. It wasn't cheap. I'd saved up for almost a year to afford it, but to me, it was worth every penny. My mother-in-law didn't agree. From the moment she saw the dress during a fitting, she wrinkled her nose and said, "It's pretty, but why would you spend so much on something you'll only wear once?" I brushed it off at the time. That's just how she is. Always a little critical. Always quick to offer an unsolicited opinion. But it didn't stop there. A few weeks after the wedding, my husband and I were still basking in that newlywed glow, organizing gifts and settling into our little house. I'd had the dress professionally cleaned and stored in a protective garment bag, which I hung in the guest room closet until I could figure out where to keep it long term. Then one Saturday, my mother-in-law stopped by unannounced. She's notorious for doing this, just swinging by because she happened to be in the area. I don't love it, but I try to be gracious. That afternoon, I was in the backyard, repotting some succulents, when I heard her voice through the open kitchen window. Hello? Anyone home? I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped inside. Oh, hi, I said, forcing a polite smile. We weren't expecting you today. I just thought I'd drop off some Tupperware, she said, holding up a plastic container. You left these at Easter. We chatted for a few minutes in the kitchen, then her eyes drifted toward the hallway. Can I use the restroom? She asked. Of course, I said. She disappeared down the hall. Or so I thought. After several minutes, I realized I hadn't heard the bathroom door open or close. Frowning, I walked quietly down the hall. And that's when I saw her. She was in the guest room, the closet door wide open, her hands on the garment bag. What are you doing? I asked sharply. She spun around, startled, her fingers still clutching the fabric. Oh, I was just looking at the dress again, she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. It's so beautiful. I thought maybe I could borrow it. Borrow it? Yes. For a charity gala next month. You know, something tasteful. I'd, of course, get it dry cleaned before returning it. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. It's not a cocktail dress, I said finally. It's my wedding gown. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, I know, but it's silly for it to just hang here, gathering dust. Don't you think it would be lovely if it got a second life? No, I said firmly. It's not available to borrow. Her face fell into a pout. Well, that's selfish. I thought we were family now. Isn't marriage about sharing? Not my wedding dress, I said. That's not up for discussion. She huffed and stormed out of the room. I thought that was the end of it. But a few days later, I came home from work to find the garment bag missing. I tore the house apart, checking every closet, every storage bin, every possible place I might have moved it. Panic set in. Then I remembered. My mother-in-law had stopped by earlier that day to drop off some banana bread. My heart sank. I called her immediately. Hi. Oh, did you get the bread? She said cheerfully. Did you take my wedding dress? There was a pause. Well, I wouldn't say took. I'm just borrowing it for the gala. I was going to call you tonight. You had no right to take it, I said, my voice shaking. Oh, don't be dramatic, she replied. I'll take excellent care of it. You'll get it back good as new. You need to return it. Today. She sighed theatrically. Fine. But you're being completely unreasonable about this. I wish I could say that was the end of the story. But when she brought the dress back the next evening, I noticed a faint but unmistakable stain near the hem. Did you try it on? I asked, horrified. She didn't even look ashamed. Of course I did. I needed to see if it fit. And it did, mostly. I might need to have it taken in a bit. At that moment I saw red. You will never touch this dress again, I said, snatching the garment bag from her hands. Do you understand? She rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath as she left. That night, I locked the dress in a storage trunk and pushed it into the attic, swearing to myself that if she ever set foot near it again, I'd move it to a safety deposit box. My husband was furious when he found out. To his credit, he immediately called her and told her she was out of line. She still insists I overreacted, but I don't care. That dress may only be a piece of fabric to her, but to me, it's a memory. And some memories aren't meant to be borrowed. Story 4. I secretly paid off my brother's mortgage, and no one in my family knows. I've been carrying this secret for almost 3 years now. It sits in my chest like a pebble, small but heavy, shifting whenever I talk to my family. I don't regret what I did, not for a second. But there are nights when I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if keeping it to myself was the right choice. It started one quiet evening in early spring. I was visiting my brother and his wife at their little house on the edge of town. The kids were in their pajamas, curled up on the couch, watching some animated movie. The scent of lasagna lingered in the air, warm and comforting, and a soft breeze drifted in through the screen door. After the kids were in bed, we sat out back on their creaky wooden porch. The night was still, with only the faint sound of crickets and the occasional hum of a passing car in the distance. He cracked open 2 beers and handed me one. "You ever feel like you're just treading water?" he asked, staring up at the stars. I didn't answer right away. He took a long sip and let out a heavy sigh. "I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my life, I love my family, but every month feels like we're barely keeping up. The mortgage, the bills, the repairs, there's always something. I work 50, sometimes 60 hours a week, and it still feels like we're drowning a little more every month." I looked over at him. His shoulders were hunched, his hands calloused and stained from years at the mechanic shop. He looked tired in a way I hadn't noticed before, like the exhaustion had seeped deep into his bones. "You've always been the smart one," he said, suddenly, glancing at me with a faint smile. "You planned ahead, saved, did things the right way. I wish I'd been more like that." "Don't say that," I replied softly. "You've built a beautiful life here." He chuckled and took another sip of beer. "Yeah, but I worry sometimes. What happens if I lose my job? What happens if one big thing goes wrong? I don't want the kids to feel the way we did growing up, you know? Always watching mom and dad fight over money." That conversation stayed with me for weeks. My brother has never been the kind of man to ask for help. Even as kids, he'd grit his teeth and try to fix things himself, whether it was a broken bike chain or a scraped knee. I knew if I offered to help with their mortgage, he'd refuse. His pride wouldn't let him accept it. But I couldn't stand by and watch him slowly wear himself down. So I started thinking, and then I started planning. A few weeks later, I made an appointment at his bank. I still remember how nervous I felt walking through those glass doors. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding in my chest. The woman behind the counter greeted me with a polite smile. "How can I help you today?" I'd like to pay off a mortgage," I said, "but not my own, my brother's, and I want to do it anonymously." Her smile faltered slightly. "That's unusual," she said. "I know, but it's important." She asked me to wait while she made some phone calls. 10 minutes later, I was ushered into a small office where a mortgage officer explained the process. "We can process it as a third-party payment," she said. "Your name won't appear anywhere on his account. He'll just see a note that the balance is 0. I nodded. "Do it." Writing the check felt surreal. It was the largest amount I'd ever signed away in my life. My hand trembled slightly as I scrawled my name on the dotted line. But when I thought about my brother's tired eyes and the way his voice had cracked that night on the porch, I knew it was the right thing to do. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. "Something weird happened," my brother said, his voice tight. "Weird how?" "The bank sent us a letter. It says the mortgage has been paid off." "Completely." "That's great," I said cautiously. "It doesn't make sense. We didn't do anything. We've just been making the regular payments." "Maybe it's a clerical error," I suggested, trying to sound convincing. "Yeah, maybe." But I could hear the skepticism in his voice. For months afterward, he called the bank repeatedly, trying to get answers. Each time they told him the same thing. The balance was 0. Paid in full. Eventually, he gave up. The next time I visited, something felt different. The house was brighter somehow. There was fresh paint on the front door, new curtains in the living room. My brother's face looked lighter too, as if a weight he didn't even realize he was carrying had finally been lifted. He and his wife started talking about small renovations. Nothing big, just little improvements to make the house feel more like a home. One evening, as we sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, his wife reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It feels like we can finally breathe again," she said softly. I smiled and took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth wash over me. It's been almost 3 years now, and no one knows the truth. Not my brother, not his wife, not even my own partner. There are nights when I'm tempted to tell them, especially when my brother thanks me for always being there, for always supporting him. But I don't, because I know him. If he ever found out, he wouldn't see it as a gesture of love. He'd see it as an insult to his ability to provide for his family. So I keep quiet. And every time I see him laughing with his kids in that little backyard, I remind myself that this secret was worth it, even if it means carrying it alone. Story 5. My landlord tried to keep my entire security deposit, so I made sure he lost everything. I moved into the apartment with such high hopes. It was my first place after college, a small, one-bedroom in a converted brownstone on a tree-lined street in Massachusetts. The hardwood floors creaked, the radiators clanked in winter, and the windows were drafty. But it was mine. At the time, I didn't care that the landlord seemed a little off. The first time I met him, he showed up 20 minutes late, smelled faintly of stale cigarettes, and barely looked at me as he handed over the lease. "You break it, you pay for it," he grunted, pointing a stubby finger at the document. Still, the rent was reasonable, and the location was perfect. I signed without asking too many questions. For the first few months, things were fine. I paid on time, kept the place spotless, and never made any noise complaints. But over time, I started noticing things about him. He never responded to maintenance requests. When the hot water went out for 3 days, I had to shower at the gym. When the kitchen sink started leaking, I bought a wrench and fixed it myself. Why bother him? I thought. It's only temporary. Fast forward 2 years. I'd landed a better job across the state and found a cute little house to rent with a backyard for my dog. I gave the required 60-day notice and started packing up my life. The day I moved out, I scrubbed every inch of that apartment. I'm talking walls, baseboards, even the inside of the oven. I wanted to leave no reason for him to dock my security deposit. 2 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. I tore it open eagerly, expecting to see my $1,200 deposit check. Instead, there was a single sheet of paper. "Dear tenant, per our inspection, we found the following damages. Scratches on hardwood floors, $400. Stains on carpet, $300. Repainting entire apartment, $500. Total, $1,200. No refund will be issued." I stared at the letter, my hands trembling. The hardwood floors? They were old and worn when I moved in. The carpet? There was no carpet. The entire place had hardwood. Repainting? The walls were the same dull beige they'd been when I arrived. This wasn't a mistake. He was trying to steal my deposit. I called him immediately. "This is ridiculous," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "There was no damage. You can't just make things up." He laughed, a low, wheezy chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Take it up with the courts, kid," he said. "Good luck." Then he hung up. At first, I considered letting it go. I had a new job, a new house, and a new chapter of my life waiting. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't just about me. If he'd done this to me, how many other tenants had he scammed over the years? So I decided to fight back. I started small. I pulled out my lease agreement and read every word. There it was in black and white. Landlord must provide an itemized list of damages with receipts for repairs within 30 days of tenant's move-out. I checked the calendar. It had been 35 days. Strike one. Then I dug into Massachusetts tenant laws. Turns out, landlords who fail to return a security deposit properly can be sued for triple damages plus legal fees. Strike two. I gathered my evidence. Timestamp photos of the apartment from move-out day. Emails and texts showing he never mentioned damages until after I moved out. A copy of his letter admitting he kept the deposit. Then I filed a claim in small claims court. 2 months later, we faced off in front of a judge. He swaggered in like he owned the place, clutching a yellow folder and smirking. But when the judge asked for receipts for the alleged repairs, his confidence faltered. I don't have them with me, he mumbled. You don't have them? The judge repeated. They're at home. The judge sighed. Without receipts, I have no proof that any of these repairs occurred. And since you failed to return the deposit within 30 days, the tenant is entitled to treble damages. The gavel came down. He owed me $3,600 plus court costs. But it didn't stop there. As I walked out of the courtroom, another former tenant approached me. Did he try to screw you over too? She asked. We exchanged stories. Then we posted on the local renters Facebook group. Within days, a dozen people came forward with similar experiences. One of them worked for the city's housing department. Turns out, my landlord had been renting units without proper certificates of occupancy, ignoring maintenance codes, and evicting people illegally. Within 6 months, he was under investigation. Last I heard, he lost most of his properties and was fined heavily for multiple violations. As for me, I used part of my court settlement to buy a fancy espresso machine for my new kitchen. Every morning, as I sip my perfectly brewed latte, I smile. Sometimes revenge really is best served hot. Story 6. My father's old truck sat in our yard for 15 years, until I found the perfect way to bring it back to life. The old truck had been sitting in the yard for as long as I could remember. It was a faded blue Chevy, the kind you don't see on the road much anymore. Its paint was chipped and flaking, the tires were flat, and rust had crept across the body like ivy climbing up an old brick wall. When I was a kid, I used to sit in the driver's seat, gripping the cracked steering wheel and pretending I was on some great adventure. But to my father, it wasn't just a truck. It was his first big purchase after marrying my mom. The truck he'd used to drive her home from the hospital with me, swaddled in her arms. The truck he'd used to haul lumber for the deck he built behind our house, where we ate countless summer dinners under the stars. But as the years went on, life got busy. The truck broke down one winter, and with bills piling up, there was no money to fix it. I'll get around to it one day, Dad used to say, his hand resting gently on the hood as if he were reassuring an old friend. One day never came. My father passed away 5 years ago. It was sudden, one of those phone calls you never expect but always fear. In the weeks that followed, I'd sit on that deck he built, staring at the old truck parked under the oak tree, leaves gathered on its windshield, squirrels darted in and out of the wheel wells. My mother suggested we have it towed away. It's just taking up space, she said softly. Your dad would understand. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Every time I looked at that truck, I could see him, sitting behind the wheel, one arm slung out the open window, singing along to some country song on the radio. So it stayed. This past spring, I finally decided it was time. Not to get rid of it, but to bring it back to life. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I knew it would be expensive. I knew it would take time. But something inside me kept whispering, It's worth it. So I started making calls. The first mechanic I spoke to laughed. "That thing's a fossil," he said. "You're better off buying something new." The second told me it was possible, but warned it would cost more than the truck was worth. But I didn't care about market value. This wasn't about money. I found a small family-run shop on the edge of town. The owner, a gray-haired man named Joe, listened patiently as I told him about the truck and what it meant to my family. When I was done, he nodded. "Let's see what we can do." The restoration took months. Every Saturday, I'd drive out to Joe's shop to check on the progress. At first, it looked hopeless. The engine was seized, the frame was rusted in spots, and even the bench seat was torn and sagging. But piece by piece, it started to come together. The engine was rebuilt, the frame was reinforced, the body was sanded down and repainted the exact shade of blue from an old photo I found in my parents' wedding album. Joe even found a way to reupholster the bench seat with soft leather that felt almost identical to the original. The day I brought it home, I parked it in the exact same spot under the oak tree. When my mother stepped outside and saw it, she froze. Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment she didn't say a word. Then she whispered, "It looks just like it did the day he brought it home." Tears filled her eyes as she walked around the truck, running her fingers lightly along the glossy paint. "You did this?" she asked softly. I nodded. She climbed into the passenger seat and sat there for a long time, staring out the windshield like she was seeing the past replay in her mind. "Your dad would have loved this," she said finally. Since then, I've made it a habit to take the truck out for a drive every Sunday morning. I don't blast the radio or speed down the highway. I drive slowly, letting the wind ripple through the open windows, the engine's low rumble filling the silence. Sometimes it feels like Dad's riding shotgun. And for a few quiet moments, it's almost like he never left. Story 7. My fiancée lied about having a child, and I found out 2 weeks before our wedding. 2 weeks. 2 weeks before the wedding I'd spent a year planning, I found out the man I was about to marry had been keeping a secret so big, I still don't know how to process it. But let me back up. When I met Chris 3 years ago, it felt like fate. We were both in line at a food truck festival, arguing playfully over which vendor made the best lobster rolls. He offered to buy me one so I could see the error of my ways. I laughed, said yes, and we ended up sitting on the curb, eating lobster rolls, and sharing stories until the sun went down. Chris was charming in a quiet, unassuming way. He had this calm energy about him, like no matter how chaotic the world got, he'd always be steady. I fell hard. We moved in together after a year. I won't pretend everything was perfect, no relationship is, but we fit. We had our routines: Friday night takeout, Sunday morning farmers markets, evenings on the couch with him rubbing my feet while we watched old movies. When he proposed last summer, I cried so hard I couldn't even say yes. I just nodded and hugged him until he laughed and slipped the ring on my finger. It felt like everything in my life was finally coming together. Then I found the letter. It was a Tuesday evening. Chris was working late, and I was digging through our home office trying to find an envelope to mail a batch of wedding invitations. One of his desk drawers jammed halfway open. I tugged at it, and it finally slid free, spilling a folder of papers onto the floor. I knelt down, gathering them up, and that's when I saw it. A legal document from the state's family court system. At the top, in bold letters, child support agreement. My stomach dropped. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. It was all there, in black and white. Chris had a 6-year-old son. He was paying monthly child support to a woman named Melissa. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking to the kitchen. I just remember sitting at the table with that folder in front of me, staring at the same 3 words over and over. Monthly obligation, $700. My mind raced. A child. Chris had a child. And he never told me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. But when I heard his car pull into the driveway, all I felt was numb. He walked in carrying takeout bags, smiling like nothing had changed. Hey, babe. They were out of pad thai, so I got extra spring rolls. Chris. Something in my voice made him pause. He set the bags down slowly. What's wrong? I slid the folder across the table. His face went pale. Where did you find this? In your drawer. Silence. Is it true? I asked finally. Do you have a child? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sank into the chair across from me and buried his face in his hands. Yes, he said quietly. The words hit me like a punch. How long were you planning to keep this from me? I whispered. I don't know. You don't know? I wanted to tell you, he said quickly. I swear I did, but every time I tried, I got scared. Scared you'd leave me, scared you'd think I was damaged goods. This isn't a scratch on your car, Chris. This is a whole human being. I know, he said, his voice cracking. I screwed up. I screwed up so badly, but please don't let this ruin us. We sat there for hours. He told me everything. Melissa was his college girlfriend. They broke up before she realized she was pregnant. I was 23 and stupid, he said. I wasn't ready to be a dad. I thought she'd have an abortion or give the baby up for adoption, but she didn't. And by the time I wrapped my head around it, we were too far gone as a couple to make it work. He'd been paying support since the boy was born, but admitted he hadn't been a big presence in his life. I send gifts on birthdays and Christmas. I visit sometimes, but I've never been a full-time dad. I didn't want to scare you away with all of this. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind flipping through memories like a Rolodex. All the times Chris had brushed off questions about kids. All the moments I'd imagined us building a family from scratch. Our family. And now, that dream felt like it had cracked down the middle. The next morning, he begged me to forgive him. We can get through this, he said. Please don't call off the wedding. But how do you marry someone who's kept something this big from you? How do you trust them again? It's been 12 days. The wedding is in 2 weeks, and I still don't know what to do. Half my heart says to walk away, that a marriage built on secrets will crumble. The other half says, maybe people make mistakes. Huge, life-altering mistakes, and still deserve second chances. Chris has been sleeping on the couch since that night. He looks broken every time I walk past him. And I feel broken too. I don't know if I'll ever post an update. Right now, all I can do is sit here in my quiet house, staring at my wedding dress in the corner, and wonder if I'll ever wear it. Story 8. I found my late grandmother's recipe box and brought her Sunday dinners back to life. When I was little, Sundays at Grandma Ruth's house were sacred. It didn't matter what the weather was doing outside. Rain or shine, summer or winter, we'd pile into her tiny kitchen and gather around the oval table with the chipped edges. There was always a roast in the oven, warm rolls in a basket on the counter, and the smell of her famous peach cobbler drifting through the air. She'd hum to herself while stirring gravy, wearing an apron covered in flour smudges and butter stains. Families like bread dough, she used to say, her hands kneading rhythmically. You've got to work it with love, let it rest, and give it time to rise. When she passed away 10 years ago, the Sunday dinners stopped. At first, we tried to keep them alive. My mom hosted a few times, then my aunt, but it wasn't the same. The food didn't taste like hers. And we'd all end up eating in awkward silence, the house feeling too big without her laughter echoing through it. Eventually, the tradition faded. Everyone got busy with their own lives. Work, kids, errands. Sundays became just another day. This past spring, I was cleaning out my mom's attic when I stumbled across a dusty cardboard box, shoved behind some old holiday decorations. I pulled it out, coughing as a cloud of dust rose into the air. On the top, written in faded ink, Ruth's recipes. My heart skipped. Inside were dozens of index cards, each one written in her looping cursive. Chicken and dumplings, cinnamon rolls, Grandpa's favorite, Sunday roast with gravy. Some cards had little notes in the margins. Use fresh sage if you can find it. Double the butter for a hungry crowd. Don't forget, love is the secret ingredient. I sat there on the attic floor for almost an hour, thumbing through her recipes and wiping tears from my cheeks. That night, I called my mom. "Do you remember Grandma's roast?" I asked. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "I dream about that roast. What if we brought Sunday dinners back?" There was a pause. "You think people would come?" "I think they need it as much as we do." The first dinner was small. Just me, Mom, my younger brother, and my cousin Sarah. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, following Grandma's roast recipe step by step, rubbing the meat with herbs, basting it every half hour, and letting it rest under a foil tent while I whipped up mashed potatoes. When the family arrived, the house smelled like my childhood. We sat around my little kitchen table, too cramped, knees bumping, and for a moment no one spoke. Then Mom took a bite of the roast and closed her eyes. "It tastes just like hers," she whispered. Word spread quickly. By the third Sunday, there were a dozen of us squeezed into my house, kids running in the backyard, cousins catching up, my uncle helping himself to a second plate. I could almost hear Grandma laughing. Her recipes weren't just food, they were glue. Last Sunday, as we passed around a basket of warm rolls, my mom looked around the table and smiled. "You've done something special here," she said softly. "It feels like she's with us again." I nodded, blinking back tears. "Maybe she never really left," I said. And as I watched my family laugh and eat and linger long after dessert, I knew Grandma Ruth was right all along. Family's like bread dough. You've got to work it with love, let it rest, and give it time to rise. Story 9. My mother-in-law demanded we pay for her luxury vacation, and I refused. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd end up in the middle of a family war over a vacation, I probably would have laughed. But here I am. My husband Jake and I have been married for 7 years. We live in a cozy, suburban neighborhood outside Atlanta. We both work full-time, me in marketing, Jake is a software engineer, and we're saving for a house of our own. Jake's family is big, 3 siblings, 7 nieces and nephews, and a grandmother who's still sharp as a tack at 92. They're loud, loving, and incredibly close-knit. At first, I loved being part of that. His mother, Linda, is a classic Southern matriarch, warm smiles, sweet tea, and an opinion on everything. I thought we'd get along just fine. The trouble started last summer. Jake and I had been planning a modest trip to the coast for our anniversary, just a week at a small beach house in the Outer Banks. Nothing fancy, just sun, sand, and a chance to breathe. Linda found out and immediately said, "You two need to come with me to Hawaii instead. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience." I smiled, politely. "That sounds lovely, but we've already booked the beach house." Linda waved it off. "Nonsense. You can't say no to me. I'm paying." I froze. I should have been grateful. Hawaii is expensive, and I knew she had the means, but something about the way she said it rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. We appreciate the offer, Mom, Jake said carefully, but we really want to keep our plans. Linda's eyes narrowed. You don't want me to spoil you, after all I've done for this family? Over the next few days, Linda ramped up the pressure. She called multiple times a day, sent texts with photos of the beaches and resorts, even showed up unannounced at our house with brochures. Jake tried to mediate. Mom, we love you, but this isn't our style. We want something simple. She snapped back. I'm your mother. You'll do as I say. Then came the ultimatum. Fine, she said one evening over dinner. If you won't come with me, then you owe me. You'll pay for my trip instead. My mouth went dry. What? I asked, hoping I misheard. I'm serious, she said, voice sharp. You two have money. It's only fair. Jake looked at me, stunned. We're not paying for your vacation, he said firmly. Linda slammed her glass down. Well then, you're ungrateful children. Don't expect any more help from me. That was the breaking point. For months, tension simmered beneath every family gathering. I stopped answering Linda's calls. Jake avoided family dinners. But the worst was the guilt. Jake's siblings whispered to him, reminding him of all the times Linda had helped pay for school, weddings, emergencies. Don't forget who put a roof over your head, they said. I felt torn. Was I being unreasonable? Or was Linda's behavior truly entitled? Then came Thanksgiving. Linda showed up with a stack of bills, car repairs, home renovations, and the Hawaii trip costs, demanding Jake and me split the payments. We're family, she said. You don't leave your family out to dry. I looked at Jake. He shook his head. Mom, we can't do this, he said quietly. Linda's face twisted in anger. You're choosing money over family. That night, after everyone left, Jake and I sat on our porch, exhausted and defeated. We have to draw a line, I said. I know, he replied. So we did. We wrote a letter, calm, clear, and firm, explaining that while we loved Linda, we couldn't pay for her vacation or any other expenses not related to emergencies. We offered to help in other ways, visiting, babysitting nieces and nephews, planning family events, but financial support wasn't possible. The letter was delivered last week. Linda hasn't responded. The house is quieter now. Jake and I are relieved, but cautious. We're learning that love sometimes means standing up to those closest to you, even if it hurts. Story 10. After years of silence, my estranged sister reached out, and it changed everything. For as long as I can remember, my sister and I didn't speak. It wasn't because of a fiery fight or a specific falling out. There was no big blow-up, no shouted words or slammed doors. It was more like a slow drift, a quiet growing distance that stretched and stretched until one day, there was nothing but silence between us. Growing up, we were inseparable. We shared clothes, borrowed makeup, whispered secrets in the dark, and planned our futures on lazy summer afternoons. When one of us got into trouble at school, the other had our back without question. We were a team. Our house was small, but it was filled with laughter and warmth. Mom worked long hours to keep food on the table, and we made do with what we had. But as we grew older, life's currents pulled us apart. My sister left for college across the country, chasing dreams I could only watch from afar. I stayed behind, juggling jobs and trying to help Mom keep the lights on. Phone calls became fewer and shorter. Texts were left unread. Years slipped by like sand through fingers. I won't lie. There were nights I lay awake, reaching for my phone, debating whether to send a message. What would I even say? Hey, it's been a while. I miss you. But the fear was overwhelming. What if she had moved on? What if I'd been erased from her life? The silence felt safer. Then, one cold winter evening, when the wind howled outside and snow lay thick on the ground, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "Hey," it said simply. "I've been thinking about you." My heart felt like it might burst. We began talking again, slowly. At first, it was small talk, weather, mutual friends, memories of childhood games. She told me about the snowstorm she missed. I shared stories of Mom's old dog who still waited by the door for her return. With every message, the distance seemed to shrink. One afternoon, she sent me a photo. Our old childhood home, dusted in snow, smoke curling softly from the chimney. "I miss this place," she wrote. Looking at that image, I was flooded with memories. The worn wooden porch where we carved our initials, the garden where we planted sunflowers each summer, the creaky staircase that groaned beneath our feet as we chased each other through the house. We agreed to meet. I drove 3 hours to her apartment, my nerves tangled like knots in my stomach. When I stepped through the door, she was there, smiling, open-armed, just like the sister I remembered. No awkwardness, no resentment, just two women reclaiming a bond long forgotten. That weekend we cooked together, laughing over burnt casseroles and perfect batches of cookies. We talked about the years lost, her challenges with school, the heartbreaks, the triumphs. I shared my own story, working odd jobs, nights spent worrying about bills, moments of loneliness. We cried and we laughed. We rediscovered the rhythm of sisterhood. On Sunday evening, as I packed to leave, we sat on her couch, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea. "I wish we hadn't waited so long," she said softly. "Me too," I whispered. But there was peace now, a new beginning. Since then, we've rebuilt our relationship, slowly, patiently, with care. Weekly calls have become routine. Visits, though not as often as we'd like, are filled with warmth and meaning. We listen to each other, really listen, without judgment. Sometimes the hardest step is reaching out. But that step can change everything. And sometimes silence isn't the end, it's just the space before a beautiful new chapter begins. If you're still awake, thank you for spending your time with us. We'd love to have you back tomorrow night, so go ahead and subscribe. Tap like if this video helped you unwind. And let us know in the comments what kind of stories help you fall asleep. Sleep well. See you in the next one.